Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really fascinating, objective look at the mechanics of belief and manipulation. We're going to map out exactly how incredibly intelligent, earnest seekers get drawn into high-control groups, specifically the Figu movement centered around UFO contactee Billy Meier. We're peeling back the layers of the source material to expose the ideological rot hiding beneath all those cosmic promises, and we'll look at the actual roadmap former members used to reclaim their spiritual sovereignty. So let's just get right into it.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with deconstruction in the allure, move into disillusionment and ideological rot, tackle the Nokodominian paradox, and finally wrap up with reconstruction.
Part 1. Deconstruction and the allure.
Our journey really kicks off around 2012 with this profound sense of spiritual hunger. Imagine someone actively deconstructing their childhood Christianity, right? They're searching for a new map for reality, and suddenly they find what seems like absolute clarity in a book called the Talmud of Emmanuel. Because, when you leave a rigid religious structure, that desire for meaning doesn't just vanish. You're still desperately searching for truth just outside the church walls. You still want that map. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the trap. When you leave one worldview behind, a high-control group like Figu swoops right in. It fills that void by presenting itself as this completely rational cosmic alternative. It offers cosmic order, reincarnation, peace teachings, all wrapped up in this aesthetic of neutral logic and science. At first glance, it doesn't look like a cult at all. It looks like exactly the clarity you've been craving, totally free of that old religious dogma.
Which brings us to Part 2, disillusionment and ideological rot. Now let's examine the exact turning point where those beautiful cosmic teachings stop sounding like universal wisdom and start revealing some deep structural harm. When you look at the source material, you see a timeline of Billy Meier's prophecies that reveals a verifiable, undeniable pattern of false starts. I mean, he repeatedly warned that a Third World War was going to kick off in 2006. Well, when that didn't happen, suddenly the goalposts moved to 2008, and then 2010, then 2011, and finally 2012. You see this a lot, right? In any high-control group, when prophecies fail, the leader almost always shifts the blame to the followers or some invisible cosmic forces. But looking at it objectively, this string of verifiably false predictions is the first major crack in the facade. It visually proves the absolute collapse of his prophetic authority. The information coming from the top just isn't reliable.
But here's the thing, the broken prophecies aren't even the most concerning part of the doctrine. When you dig underneath all that talk of peace and stars, the foundational documents reveal some seriously problematic ideologies. For example, Meier's intense focus on overpopulation. It actually functions as a sort of soft eugenics, literally deciding who is an evolutionary burden. On top of that, there's this bizarre obsession with the German language, claiming it's the one and only true language for spiritual evolution, which is then paired with a deep dive into runic mysticism. This practically acts as a white supremacist pipeline. And incredibly, the texts actually excuse Adolf Hitler's atrocities. Yeah, no kidding. In their writings, Hitler is described as a genius who is destined to lead, but they claim his mind was hijacked by evil alien intelligences through the Thule Society. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is that Figu's ideology goes way, way beyond quirky UFO beliefs. We're looking at a framework that normalizes eugenics and uses spiritual language, like literal alien possession, to excuse horrific historical atrocities and totally erase human accountability.
Okay. Part 3. The Nokodominian paradox.
As we peel back the layers of this belief system, we hit a total intellectual collapse, and it centers entirely around a figure known as Nokodominian. According to the cult's lore, Nokodominian is this ancient spirit form that Billy Meier claims to be. The teachings explicitly state that this spirit has incarnated for millions of years as major historical prophets like Enoch, Jesus, and Muhammad. But here's the massive catch. Meier's own texts admit that these past incarnations intentionally weaponized belief, spread lies, and historically caused massive chaos, dogma, and even galactic unrest.
Which brings us to this absolutely stunning admission in their official philosophy. It literally says, prophets must lie to their followers. I mean, former members have reported that even top Figu leadership, Meier's own right-hand guys, admitted they would straight up lie to followers to protect the movement. Their very own texts confess that their prophets intentionally propagated turmoil and deception just to control the narrative. And how do they justify this? They actually frame this deception as a sort of strategic divine mercy, basically a twisted test of faith for the followers.
So that sets up this completely devastating paradox. Ask yourself, would you trust a doctor who poisoned you in 5 past lives but says, hey, this time I've got it right? No way, right? The leader is claiming his own spiritual lineage lied to entire civilizations, creating war and religious dogma. Yet in the same breath, he demands blind obedience from his current followers, insisting that this time he is the sole source of truth. This exposes the ultimate psychological manipulation of the group. It totally shatters critical thinking by creating this closed-loop ecosystem. In that ecosystem, any red flag, any failed prophecy, or outright lie is just accepted as profound wisdom that you simply aren't evolved enough to understand yet.
Finally, we arrive at part 4, Reconstruction.
So once a seeker finally sees through that massive paradox, escaping the twisted logic is really just the beginning. Acknowledging the lie isn't the end of the story, it's actually the start of a very messy middle. And in this specific journey, former members describe losing their entire community not just once but twice. Leaving meant becoming spiritually homeless all over again. Think about it, first they lost their community when they initially deconstructed Christianity, and then they lose it a second time when they walk away from the alien movement. Figu wasn't just a set of ideas, it was their friends, their daily routines, their entire shared cosmic purpose. Losing all of that twice causes immense, intense psychological disorientation. Because when you leave, you're not just questioning the group anymore. You have to start questioning yourself, your own discernment, and fundamentally how you even process reality.
Navigating through that heavy disorientation is exactly how a person gets their sovereignty back. And as you'll see, it is a very nonlinear process. Step 1 is just acknowledging the lie and the manipulation. It's about deliberately cutting through all that spiritual bypassing that kept you compliant for so long. Then there's step 2, which honestly is often the hardest part, giving up the community and the worldview. It involves actively mourning the loss of this grand cosmic map you thought you finally had. And finally, step 3 is rebuilding. But this time, you're doing it without outsourcing your discernment to a prophet. These steps really highlight that true spiritual sovereignty means you never again need a guru, a leader, or some ancient spirit to speak to the divine on your behalf.
So I want to leave you with this really provocative thought to explore on your own. What motivates you when fear and hierarchy are absolutely no longer welcome in your spiritual life? When you're no longer exhausting yourself chasing the carrot of spiritual evolution dangled by a leader, and when you decide to build a system of care rather than a system of control, what kind of grounded normativity will you choose to guide your own sovereign path? It's a lot to think about for sure. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.